Death's bright finger swept the black waters. The Japanese destroyer's searchlight carved through darkness like a blade. Our wooden bow escaped by inches. 23 American sailors pressed their bodies against PT 164's deck. We tried to melt into the shadows. The night held its breath. Engines dropped to whispers. We drifted through Vela La Vela's protective darkness. Behind that hunting destroyer, 3 massive Japanese transports cut through the Solomon Sea. Their steel hulls carried nearly 8,000 enemy soldiers. These troops were bound for Kolombangara. Their mission was to reinforce Japanese positions. Their journey would end in black water and fire. July 19, 1943. The clock showed 4 minutes before hell would break loose. My hands locked onto the twin .50 caliber mount. White knuckles betrayed my tension. Sweat mixed with salt spray on my face. Whispered coordinates passed between shadow figures. Ensign Robert Dutch Vanderberg fed numbers to our skipper. Lieutenant Commander Arthur Mac McPherson absorbed every detail. Green phosphorescent glow marked our compass face. This single instrument provided our only permitted light. Volcanic peaks of Vela La Vela cast moon shadows across the water. PT 168 and PT 171 waited in that darkness. Both boats held position. Both crews prepared for war. America's secret weapons rode these waters. The Japanese Navy was about to learn hard truths. Darkness no longer belonged to the rising sun. My name carries through decades now. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Tom Harrigan, United States Navy Reserve. I helped prove wooden boats could sink steel warships. People ask about those nights. They want to know what it felt like. They imagine glory and heroics. The truth cuts deeper. We stayed too busy trying not to die. History happened around us while we fought for survival. Our mission was simple in concept. Those 8,000 Japanese soldiers must not reach Kolombangara. Every torpedo in our tubes represented American lives. Hundreds of Marines depended on our success tonight. Each enemy transport we sent to the bottom meant fewer Gold Star mothers, fewer telegrams from the War Department, fewer flag-draped coffins returning home. Our small wooden boats challenged the Imperial Japanese Navy at its peak power. Understanding this requires knowing our enemy. The summer of 1943 found Japanese naval forces supremely confident. Night fighting had become their specialty. Their crews trained for years in darkness combat. Radar meant nothing to them. Keen eyesight and practiced coordination guided their attacks. Savo Island the previous August proved their mastery. 4 Allied cruisers went to the bottom that night. Japanese losses totaled 0 ships. They owned the darkness throughout the Solomon Islands. Every sunset brought new danger from their supply runs. Americans called these missions the Rat Run. Japanese sailors knew them as the Tokyo Express. Either name meant the same thing. Enemy troops and supplies moved freely once stars appeared. Traditional American naval power struggled against this new warfare. Our admirals learned their trade at Jutland and Manila Bay. Fleet actions in open ocean made sense to them. Confined waters of the Solomons created impossible tactical problems. Big ships became sitting targets. Heavy cruisers and destroyers couldn't adapt quickly enough. Something completely different was needed. Something the Japanese would never expect. American boatyards from New Orleans to New York worked in absolute secrecy. Revolution in naval warfare was taking shape in their hidden facilities. The PT boat emerged from desperation and American genius. 80 feet of length, 20 feet of beam. Laminated mahogany plywood construction instead of armor steel. 3 Packard engines pushed these craft beyond any conventional warship's speed. Modified Liberty aircraft power plants generated incredible thrust. Speeds over 45 knots were routine. No torpedo could catch us. No enemy ship could match our acceleration. Armament packed serious punch into compact space. 4 21-inch torpedo tubes held Mark 13 fish. One 20mm Oerlikon cannon provided main battery firepower. 4 50-caliber machine guns swept decks clean of enemy personnel. Ammunition stores supported 15 minutes of sustained combat. After that, we headed home, or headed down. February 1943 brought me to Melville, Rhode Island. The Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron Training Center occupied wind-swept facilities along the coast. I arrived as a destroyer sailor fresh from North Atlantic convoy duty. German U-boats had taught me about sudden death at sea. The Navy requested volunteers for hazardous experimental vessel duty. No details were provided about these mysterious craft. Only casualty rate estimates exceeded 50%. 200 men volunteered initially. 40 made the final selection. My qualification came from celestial navigation skills and small boat experience. Growing up on Chesapeake Bay provided essential seamanship background. PT-164 looked like a mistake when I first stepped aboard. This couldn't possibly be a warship. Glorified speedboat with delusions of grandeur described it better. Wood construction in an age of steel and armor seemed insane. Living quarters were impossibly cramped. Hot bunking wasn't just common practice. It was absolutely mandatory for crew rotation. Armor protection consisted of sheet metal around the bridge area. Nothing else provided cover from enemy fire. One rifle bullet in the wrong place could turn us into floating matchsticks. Fuel tanks and ammunition magazines sat exposed throughout the hull. We were floating bombs waiting for ignition. Then, Mac McPherson changed everything. Our skipper was 28 years old, ancient by PT boat standards. His eyes had seen too much already in this war. Pearl Harbor found him aboard destroyer USS Shaw when Japanese planes attacked. Midway added more scars to his record. He volunteered for PT boats with clear motivation. "I'm tired of being a target," he explained simply. "Time to become the hunter instead." Mac understood truths that took the rest of us weeks to grasp. PT boats weren't designed for conventional naval warfare. We were maritime guerrillas operating from ambush positions. Seagoing assassins who struck without warning and vanished before retaliation. Our crew represented misfits and specialists never found together on regular Navy vessels. Dutch Vanderberg served as executive officer, despite being a Yale mathematics professor. His brain calculated torpedo firing solutions faster than most men worked slide rules. Mental arithmetic replaced mechanical computation in combat situations. Chief motor machinist's mate, Carlos Charlie Mendoza, had built racing engines in Los Angeles before Pearl Harbor. Those temperamental Packard engines responded to his touch like trained animals. He could make them purr like house cats during stealth approaches. He could make them roar like lions when combat demanded maximum power. Radioman, Second Class, William Sparks. Patterson came from submarine service. Silent radio operations were second nature to him. No electronic emissions would betray our positions while he controlled communications. His fingers found switches and dials in absolute darkness. Gunner's Mate, First Class. Patrick "Paddy" O'Brien was an artist with mechanical fish. Each Mark 13 torpedo weighed 2,200 pounds. Each cost more than a house back home. Paddy treated them better than most men treated their wives. Constant adjustment, cleaning, and sweet-talking kept them ready. "These beauties," he'd say while polishing bronze propellers. are the only reason the Japs will take us seriously. One shot, one kill, or we're just expensive target practice. His devotion to those weapons bordered on obsession. Every torpedo represented multiple chances to sink enemy shipping. The rest of our 12-man crew included 2 additional gunners, 1 engineer, a cook who doubled as medic, and 3 seamen handling everything else. We were black and white, city boys and farm kids. High school dropouts served alongside college graduates. One simple fact united every man aboard. We were volunteers who'd signed up knowing survival was unlikely. Training at Melville was brutal beyond description. Early PT boat losses had taught the Navy hard lessons. Enthusiasm alone wouldn't win this war. We needed to become faster, smarter, and more vicious than anything Japanese forces could deploy against us. High-speed attack runs became routine until we could launch torpedoes accurately while bouncing across waves at 40 knots. Navigation by sound and instinct replaced traditional methods when tropical squalls reduced visibility to 0. Most importantly, we learned to think like pirates rather than conventional sailors. Naval Academy traditions meant nothing out here. Commander James Wild Jim Patterson ran the training program with iron discipline. He'd survived the Philippines campaign and escaped Corregidor on one of the last PT boats out. His training philosophy was elegantly simple and completely ruthless. The Japanese expect you to fight fair. Don't. They expect you to follow naval tradition. Don't. They expect you to be afraid of the dark. Make them afraid instead. Our greatest weapons weren't torpedoes, he taught us. Surprise, speed, and sheer audacity would win battles. Conventional tactics would get us killed. We had to become something entirely new in naval warfare. June 30th, 1943, brought us to our forward base at Rendova. The invasion of New Georgia was just beginning. Marines were dying on hostile beaches while we prepared for night operations. Our base consisted of nothing more than a fuel dump, camouflaged concrete huts, and a rough dock hidden under palm fronds. The smell hit us first. Rotting vegetation mixed with diesel fuel created a sickening atmosphere. Sweet stench of tropical decay permeated everything. Artillery fire from New Georgia provided constant background noise. Marines were dying to take that Japanese airfield while we prepared our own missions. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 9, our unit, consisted of 12 PT boats tasked with intercepting Japanese reinforcement attempts throughout the Central Solomons. Our mission sounded deceptively simple on paper: patrol the waters between major Japanese bases and sink anything flying the rising sun flag. Reality proved far more complex and dangerous. These waters formed a maze of coral reefs, volcanic islands, and hidden Japanese strongpoints. Enemy seaplanes provided reconnaissance coverage during daylight hours. Coast watchers occupied every major island, reporting Allied ship movements. Destroyer squadrons specifically trained to hunt PT boats patrolled likely ambush areas. July 5th brought our first patrol and our first disaster. 3 boats, including ours, attempted to intercept a Japanese convoy near Visu Visu. An enemy float plane spotted us before we could reach attack position. Suddenly, 4 destroyers were bearing down on our small force with searchlights blazing and guns firing. We scattered like frightened rabbits through a gauntlet of shell splashes. PT-158 took a direct hit from a 5-inch shell and simply disintegrated. 12 men gone in an instant, blown to fragments along with their wooden boat. Nothing remained but oil slicks and floating debris. 4 hours of dodging through reefs and islands followed before we finally escaped. No torpedoes fired at enemy targets. No Japanese ships damaged in the encounter. We'd lost a boat and crew for absolutely nothing. The mathematics of war looked grim after that introduction to combat. That night, huddled in our base at Rendova, Mac gathered the surviving crews together. His voice was quiet, but carried absolute conviction. We learned something important today. We can't fight them like destroyers fight each other. We're not built for gun duels. We strike from ambush, or we don't strike at all. Hard lessons paid for in blood would shape every mission that followed. Those 12 dead sailors had taught us survival tactics with their sacrifice. Over the next 2 weeks, we developed new tactics through trial and error. Each patrol taught us something about staying alive while killing the enemy. Islands created radar shadows that masked our approach routes. Shutting down 2 engines and running on 1 reduced our noise signature dramatically. Enemy hydrophones couldn't track us as easily. Most importantly, we figured out coordination between multiple boats using simple light signals the Japanese couldn't intercept. The intelligence network supporting our operations was remarkable in scope and courage. Australian coast watchers hid in hills of Japanese-occupied islands and radioed enemy ship movements. Native Solomon Islanders risked execution if caught while paddling their canoes out to meet us with information about Japanese positions. Sometimes we received decrypted intelligence from Pearl Harbor, giving us exact convoy schedules. Most of the time, we hunted by instinct and hard-won experience. PT boats remained classified as secret weapons through July 1943. Official Navy communications never mentioned us by name. Small craft, or mosquito boats, appeared in dispatches instead. The Japanese knew something was hitting their convoys, but their initial reports described submarines, or mines, as the cause. They couldn't believe Americans would send wooden speedboats against steel warships. That ignorance provided our greatest advantage in these early operations. Japanese tactical doctrine simply didn't account for our existence. July 18th brought Coast Watcher reports of a major Japanese reinforcement convoy scheduled to run through Blackett Strait toward Vaila on Kolombangara. This represented the target we'd been waiting for. Multiple transports with minimal escort would be forced through narrow waters where superior numbers couldn't help them. Mac volunteered our boat to lead the attack along with PT-168, skippered by Lieutenant Henry Hank Bramwell, and PT-171 under Lieutenant Junior Grade Joseph Joey Antonelli. 3 boats against an entire convoy seemed like suicide, but the alternatives were worse. The evening briefing carried unusual tension. Intelligence estimated 3 large transports escorted by 1 or 2 destroyers. These ships carried elements of the Japanese 13th Regiment, elite troops who'd fought in China and the Philippines. These weren't construction battalions or supply troops. These were frontline soldiers who would make Marine lives hell on New Georgia. Commander William Bill Specht, our squadron leader, made our mission crystal clear. Gentlemen, this convoy cannot reach Vila. I don't care if you have to ram those transports. They go to the bottom tonight. No ambiguity existed in those orders. Success or death were the only options. Sunset on July 19th painted the sky blood red over the Solomons. Final preparations began as darkness approached. Paddy O'Brien ran through his torpedo checklist for the 5th time. Mark 13s were set for depth of 10 feet and speed of 28 knots. Optimal settings for hitting loaded transports at close range. Charlie Mendoza had our engines tuned to mechanical perfection. Mufflers were installed to reduce noise signatures. Dutch Vanderberg plotted and replotted our attack approach, calculating currents, wind direction, and the moon's position. Every variable that could affect torpedo accuracy received careful consideration. I checked my machine guns one final time, ensuring ammunition belts fed smoothly through the mechanisms. We loaded nothing but armor-piercing and incendiary rounds. Regular ball ammunition was useless against steel ships. API rounds could penetrate bridge windows, start fires, and suppress enemy gun crews. Every fifth round was a tracer, creating lines of fire that looked like deadly fireworks against the night sky. At 20-30 hours, we slipped our moorings and headed into gathering darkness. 3 boats moved in column formation with engines muffled to low rumbles. As we cleared Rendova Harbor, Mac ordered weapons testing. The night erupted briefly in gunfire as 12 machine guns and 3 20mm cannons barked into empty sea. Then silence returned, broken only by rhythmic pulse of our engines and hiss of water along our hulls. The ocean was rougher than we'd hoped. 2-foot chop would make torpedo accuracy challenging. But wave action also meant our wakes would be harder to spot, and engine noise would be masked by natural sounds. Every advantage mattered when 80 feet of plywood was attacking 400 feet of steel. By 2300 hours, we reached our ambush position off the north coast of Vela La Vela. Mac cut engines to idle, and we drifted in darkness, waiting for our prey to arrive. Water lapped against our hull with gentle persistence. Distant rumble of artillery from New Georgia provided constant reminder of why we were here. Then, at 23:47 hours, Sparks-Patterson picked up transmission from Coastwatcher reporting. 3 large ships, 2 escorts, bearing 280, speed 18 knots, range 15 miles from your position. The hunt was beginning. Mac started 2 engines, keeping throttles at low settings as we moved to intercept the enemy convoy. Mathematics were simple, but absolutely crucial to survival. The enemy convoy was making 18 knots on steady course. We could make 35 knots without creating too much wake signature. Correct positioning would let us intercept them exactly as they entered the narrowest part of Blackett Strait. There they'd have no room to maneuver away from our torpedoes. At WWII 18 hours on July 20th, Dutch spotted them through his binoculars. Dark shapes against the star field appeared exactly where calculations predicted. The Japanese were maintaining perfect formation discipline. 2 destroyers led the column. 3 transports followed in line. Another destroyer brought up the rear. They showed no navigation lights, but their size and regular spacing made them easy to track once you knew where to look. Mac's plan was elegantly simple and incredibly dangerous simultaneously. PT-168 would attack from the port side while PT-171 approached from starboard. We would go straight up the middle after the lead transport. This meant passing between escort destroyers, literally threading the needle between death on either side. If it worked, we'd cause maximum confusion and have clear shots at all 3 transports. If it failed, we'd be blown to pieces in crossfire from multiple enemy ships. "All ahead slow," Mac whispered into the darkness. We crept forward at 5 knots, barely moving through black water. The convoy came to us instead of us chasing them. At 2,000 yards, we could hear their engines. Deep thrumming of massive diesels pushed thousands of tons through the Solomon Sea. Sound carried clearly across calm water. At 1,500 yards, individual details became visible. The pagoda-style bridge of the lead destroyer stood out against stars. Cargo booms on the transports created distinctive silhouettes. Even figures moving on deck could be distinguished in the darkness. At 1,000 yards, Mac gave the attack signal. 3 clicks on the radio, and all 3 PT boats surged forward simultaneously. Our engines roared from idle to full throttle in seconds. Bows lifted out of water as we accelerated to attack speed. The night shattered as we raced toward the enemy convoy at 40 knots. Three small craft were challenging steel giants in their own element. The Japanese were caught completely off guard. Lookouts strained to spot submarines or approaching destroyers. They never expected attackers moving this fast from this close range. We were inside their formation before they could react properly. Racing between escort destroyers at point-blank range with guns blazing. I opened fire with twin 50s, raking the bridge of the nearest destroyer. Tracer rounds punched through windows and ricocheted off steel plating. Sparks flew where armor-piercing bullets struck home. "Fire 1! Fire 2!" Patty launched our first two Mark 13 torpedoes at 600 yards. Impossibly close range, where missing was almost impossible. The mechanical fish leaped from their tubes and splashed into water. Props were already spinning at full speed. Twin wakes of phosphorescent bubbles streaked toward the lead transport. A converted passenger liner carrying over 3,000 Japanese soldiers. The destroyer to our starboard finally reacted, swinging its searchlight toward our position. Brilliant white beam found us instantly. Blinding intensity turned night into artificial day. Immediately, their 25mm anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Green tracers reached out like deadly fingers seeking our destruction. Shells splashed around us so close that spray soaked everyone on deck. Then our torpedoes hit their target. The first struck the transport just aft of the bridge with thunderous explosion that lit up the night like lightning. The second hit amidships, breaking the ship's back instantly. The 8,000-ton vessel lifted partially out of water, then split in half. Both sections immediately began sinking into black depths. Through searchlight glare and gunfire, we could see hundreds of Japanese soldiers spilling into water. Their screams were audible even over our engines. PT-168 struck next, with both Mark 13 torpedoes slamming into the second transport. That ship was loaded with ammunition and fuel for the Vila garrison. It exploded like an active volcano. The blast was so powerful it knocked me off my feet. A wave of superheated air washed over our boat. Flaming debris rained down around us, starting small fires on our wooden deck that we frantically stomped out. The Japanese destroyers were responding now but faced an impossible tactical problem. We were too close for their main guns to depress low enough to hit us. We were mixed in with their own transports, making it dangerous for them to fire. Their solution was to try ramming us, using superior size to simply run us down through brute force. The nearest destroyer turned hard to port with its knife-edge bow aimed directly at our beam. At combined closure speed, we had maybe 10 seconds before impact. Mac threw the wheel hard right and pushed throttles past their stops. Our engines screamed in protest, but we pivoted like a ballet dancer, missing the destroyer's bow by less than 10 feet. As we passed, I emptied a full belt of ammunition into their bridge at point-blank range. Sparks flew as bullets struck home. PT-171 wasn't as lucky in the chaos. Joey Antonelli had lined up perfect shots on the third transport, but a Japanese destroyer caught them with searchlights before they could fire. Enemy 25mm cannons found their mark, stitching a line of holes across PT-171's bow. One shell hit a torpedo, but miraculously, it didn't detonate. The warhead needed to be armed by spinning in water before it would explode. Still, Joey had to abort his attack run and flee, streaming smoke and taking on water through multiple holes. We came around for another attack pass, but the element of surprise was completely gone. Every searchlight in the Japanese convoy was now sweeping the water systematically. Guns of every caliber were firing in all directions. The water around us was torn by so many shell splashes, it looked like a violent rainstorm. Worst of all, the Japanese had finally gotten their 5-inch guns into action. Those could blow us to splinters with a single direct hit. "Launch remaining fish and get us out of here," Mac shouted over the din. Paddy fired our last 2 Mark 13 torpedoes at the remaining transport. But the ship's captain saw them coming and managed to comb the wakes, turning parallel so both torpedoes passed harmlessly along his sides. Then we were running for our lives. All 3 engines at maximum power, weaving between shell splashes as we fled into protective darkness. The fight raged behind our position. PT-168 took multiple direct hits, but somehow managed to launch one final torpedo. The deadly fish found its mark on the second transport, already listing heavily to starboard. The ammunition ship began its violent death dance. Explosions rippled through her steel hull like deadly fireworks. The entire strait blazed with orange light. Secondary blasts tore through her superstructure as she plunged toward the bottom. 2 massive transports had vanished beneath the dark waters. Nearly 6,000 Japanese soldiers went down with their ships. Bodies floated in burning oil slicks. Life rafts bobbed empty in the swells. The third transport remained intact, but shaken. Her crew could see death all around them. The destroyer escorts circled nervously. Their commanders barked orders through voice tubes. Everyone knew they had walked into a trap. We pulled back 5 miles from the carnage. All 3 PT boats limped away from the engagement zone. Battle damage showed on every vessel. Shrapnel holes peppered our hulls. Smoke drifted from damaged engines. But we stayed afloat. We had survived the hell of close combat. PT-171 suffered the worst beating. Multiple holes gaped at her waterline. Seawater rushed through torn planking. One engine sputtered and died. Steam hissed from ruptured lines. We moved alongside carefully. Our crews worked together in the darkness. Wounded sailors transferred between boats. Carpenter mates grabbed anything available. Mattresses went into holes. Life jackets became plugs. Desperate hands worked frantically. Every second counted before she might sink. PT-168 had lost her radio antenna completely. Shrapnel damage scarred her entire superstructure. Metal fragments had torn through her thin armor, but her engines still ran strong. Her torpedoes were spent, but her guns remained ready. She could still fight if needed. Our own boat had somehow escaped major damage. A few shrapnel holes marked her sides. One gun barrel glowed red from overheating. Scorch marks showed where shells had passed close. But we breathed. We moved. We had accomplished our mission against overwhelming odds. The evidence floated all around us. 2 transports definitely destroyed. Thousands of enemy soldiers killed before they could kill Americans. The Japanese reinforcement schedule lay in ruins. Their carefully planned operation had turned into disaster. The surviving transport made a crucial decision. Instead of continuing toward Vila, she reversed course immediately. Her captain wanted distance from these deadly waters. The long journey back to Rabaul began in defeat. Their mission had failed completely. Our return trip became a nightmare of tension. Dawn approached rapidly. Japanese float planes would launch at first light. Search patterns would cover every mile of water. They wanted revenge for their losses. We found shelter among small islands. Palm fronds covered our boats like jungle camouflage. Engines went silent. Crews barely dared to breathe. Enemy aircraft droned overhead. Pilots searched for any sign of the attackers. We pressed against coral reefs. Sweat dripped in the tropical heat. Every minute felt like an hour. The journey should have taken 3 hours. Instead, we needed 14 hours of careful movement, island hopping from shadow to shadow, waiting for aircraft to pass, moving only when safe. But eventually all 3 boats reached Rendova. We had made it home alive. Intelligence officers swarmed over us immediately. The debriefing sessions went on for hours. Every detail mattered to them. Japanese tactics needed analysis. Weapon effectiveness required evaluation. Enemy response times got recorded carefully. Our information would reach every PT squadron across the Pacific. The lessons we learned would save American lives. Our experience would sink enemy ships throughout the remaining war years, but the immediate impact proved even more dramatic. Radio intercepts captured Japanese communications. Enemy reports described mysterious new American weapons. High-speed torpedo boats had appeared from nowhere. The Imperial Navy was experiencing genuine fear. For the first time, they dreaded the darkness. Night operations were no longer safe. Heavily guarded convoys couldn't guarantee protection. Every shadow might conceal a PT boat. Every sound could mean American engines approaching at high speed. The psychological impact spread through their entire fleet. Japanese strategy changed completely over the following weeks. Convoy sizes increased dramatically. Escort ships doubled, then tripled. Searchlight-equipped float planes began night reconnaissance missions. All these defensive measures reduced supplies reaching island garrisons. American ground forces gained crucial advantages from enemy supply problems. The psychological damage went even deeper than tactical success. Japanese soldiers waited for reinforcements that never arrived. Hope began fading among trapped garrisons. Enemy commanders couldn't guarantee supply deliveries anymore. Planned offensive operations were canceled. The myth of Japanese night fighting superiority cracked. Wooden boats crewed by American teenagers had shattered their confidence throughout the Pacific. Our squadron's success triggered rapid PT boat program expansion. New bases appeared across the Solomons and New Guinea. Improved boats entered production immediately. Better engines provided more power. Radar equipment gave night vision. Armor protection saved lives. Tactics we developed through desperate trial became official doctrine. Training bases from Rhode Island to California taught our methods. The price of success was measured in friends who never returned home. 2 weeks after our successful convoy attack, PT-166 struck a mine. The explosion tore her apart instantly. All hands were lost in the blast. No survivors floated in the wreckage. PT-162 suffered engine failure during a routine patrol. Daylight caught her dead in the water. Japanese destroyers found her helpless. They shot her to pieces methodically. Only 3 survivors were pulled from shark-infested waters. Their stories haunted us all. Joey Antonelli commanded PT-171 with skill and courage. A sniper's bullet found him while refueling at a forward base. The shot came from jungle cover. He died instantly at his post. Another good friend gone forever. By October 1943, I was rotating back to the States for new construction training. Our squadron had lost 7 boats during my tour. 73 men had died in those wooden hulls. But we had sunk or damaged over 40 Japanese vessels. Destroyers went to the bottom. Barges never reached their destinations. Thousands of enemy soldiers died before they could kill Americans. The exchange rate was brutal, but absolutely necessary. Every PT boat we lost could be replaced quickly. American shipyards worked around the clock. New crews trained constantly. But Japanese ships and experienced crews were irreplaceable. Their losses mounted steadily. Their capabilities declined with each engagement. I returned to Pacific combat in March 1944 as executive officer of PT-321. The Philippines became our new hunting ground. The boats had improved dramatically. Radar showed targets in complete darkness. Armor plate protected cockpit areas. More reliable torpedoes increased hit probability. But the core mission remained unchanged. Speed provided our primary advantage. Surprise was our deadliest weapon. Audacity made us unpredictable. We continued proving that American innovation could overcome any enemy advantage. The Japanese never fully adapted to our PT boat threat. They tried specialized hunter-killer groups. Radar-equipped destroyers hunted us methodically. They even built suicide boats designed to ram our vessels, but they couldn't be everywhere simultaneously. They couldn't protect every convoy completely. They couldn't make the night safe again for their operations. The secret weapon they discovered too late had permanently shifted Pacific power balance. Mac McPherson survived the entire war. His courage earned a Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars. He remained in the Navy after victory. Eventually, he commanded a destroyer squadron during Korean combat. We maintained contact until his death in 1987. At his funeral, his son shared Mac's favorite saying. PT boats taught him real courage. Not the absence of fear, but action despite terror. Dutch Vanderburg returned to Yale after victory, but navigation lessons learned in the Solomons never left him. He became one of America's leading oceanographers. Skills honed while dodging Japanese destroyers helped him map ocean currents. Underwater mountains became his specialty. He once told me that after threading between enemy warships at 40 knots in darkness, everything else seemed simple. Charlie Mendoza went back to building racing engines in Los Angeles. Tricks learned keeping PT boat engines running made cars go faster. His garage became legendary among hot rod enthusiasts. A sign read, "Speed Shop, we made PT boats fly." He would tell customers that if he could make 4,500 horsepower push 50 tons at 45 knots, he could make anything go fast. Paddy O'Brien stayed in the Navy after the war. He became one of the service's leading torpedo experts. His manual on Mark 13 torpedo maintenance was used until the 1970s. But he never forgot those torpedoes we fired that night off Vela La Vela. "Those were my fish that sank those transports," he would say with pride. 2 shots, 2 hits, 6,000 Japanese, who never made it to kill Americans. The PT boat story often gets overshadowed by bigger World War II battles. Midway gets the headlines. Guadalcanal captures attention. Leyte Gulf dominates history books. But for those of us who served on these tiny wooden warriors, we knew our importance. We had participated in something revolutionary. We proved that technology and courage could overcome tradition and size. American sailors, who had never seen oceans before Pearl Harbor, could outfight the world's best navy at their own game. The secret wasn't really the boats themselves, though they were engineering marvels. It wasn't our torpedoes either, though when they worked, they were devastating. The real secret was American innovation spirit. The willingness to try something completely different when conventional methods failed. While admirals initially dismissed PT boats as expensive toys, junior officers and enlisted men proved that toys with teeth could change war's entire course. Every time I read about modern naval warfare, I see our legacy. Missile boats use our tactics. Stealth technology follows our principles. Asymmetric warfare copies our methods. We proved naval combat didn't require battleships slugging it out at 20,000 yards. It could be about speed and stealth, about hitting where enemies didn't expect, about disappearing before they could respond. Every fast attack craft in today's Navy carries DNA from those plywood speedboats that terrorized the Japanese fleet. A Japanese phrase entered their naval vocabulary in 1943. Simply mosquito boat terror. This fear spread throughout their entire fleet. Post-war interviews with Japanese naval officers revealed PT boats caused disruption far beyond our actual numbers. They had to assume we were everywhere. They had to plan for attacks that might never come. They wasted resources defending against threats that might be shadows. Admiral Tanaka Raizo commanded many Tokyo Express runs. He wrote after the war that American PT boats were their worst nightmare. Submarines could be hunted with depth charges. Aircraft could be seen approaching. But these devil boats appeared from nowhere. They struck like cobras. They vanished into night darkness. They made us afraid of our own element. The darkness we had once ruled completely. That fear and uncertainty we created was worth more than any number of ships sunk. It represented the turning point when the Imperial Japanese Navy began doubting itself. When sailors trained their entire lives for night combat, started fearing shadows, the psychological battle was already won. PT boat technical evolution during the war was remarkable. Early boats like ours were essentially peacetime designs pressed into combat service. By 1945, PT boats carried sophisticated radar systems. Rockets supplemented torpedoes. Advanced fish were more reliable. Even primitive guided missiles were tested. But the core concept never changed. Small, fast, deadly vessels crewed by volunteers willing to take insane risks for their country. One story captures the PT boat spirit perfectly. October 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, a PT boat squadron hopelessly outgunned attacked the Japanese battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built. Their torpedoes couldn't penetrate Yamato's massive armor belt, but they attacked anyway without hesitation. The giant battleship was forced to take evasive action. American escort carriers gained precious time to escape. Small boats didn't sink the giant that day, but their courage saved American lives. PT boat bases themselves became legends. Rendova, Tulagi, Mioswendi. Exotic names that meant mosquitoes, malaria, and midnight missions. These weren't Pearl Harbor or San Diego with officers' clubs and clean sheets. These were muddy hellholes where we lived on Spam and cigarettes. Mail took months to arrive. The only entertainment was poker and rumors. But morale remained high because we knew we were making a difference. The natives of Solomon Islands deserve special recognition. They risked everything to help us, guiding us through treacherous reefs, rescuing downed airmen and shipwrecked sailors, providing intelligence on Japanese movements. Many were executed when caught helping Americans. Their courage and sacrifice were essential to our success. Without their help, we would have been blind and lost in those island mazes. Coast watchers were our guardian angels. Those lonely volunteers hiding on Japanese-occupied islands with radios and binoculars, they would report 40 bombers heading your way, or destroyer squadron moving south at high speed. Many times their warnings saved our bases from surprise attack, or helped us position for perfect ambushes. We never met most of them face to face, but we owed them our lives. Radar technology revolutionized PT boat operations completely. Early sets were primitive. They could barely distinguish between islands and ships, but by late 1944 we could track targets in complete darkness and fog. The Japanese had relied on superior night vision and training. Suddenly they found themselves at a serious disadvantage. We could see them before they could see us. The ultimate advantage in night combat situations. Tactical evolution was constant throughout the war. We learned to use aluminum foil strips to confuse Japanese radar systems. Wolf pack tactics were developed. Multiple boats coordinated attacks from different directions. We figured out how to use shore batteries as diversions, getting enemies to reveal positions by firing at fake targets while we maneuvered for real attacks. The most dangerous missions were ones nobody heard about: resupplying coast watchers behind enemy lines, evacuating trapped Marines from surrounded beaches, running ammunition to isolated outposts under heavy enemy fire. These weren't glamorous torpedo attacks, but grinding, dangerous work that saved countless American lives. We became the Navy's Swiss Army knife, used for any job too dangerous or crazy for conventional vessels. Personal relationships on PT boats were unique in military service. On destroyers with 300 men, you might not know everyone's name. On PT boats with 12 men, you knew everything: who snored loudly, who had nightmares, who got seasick easily, who could be counted on when things went to hell. That intimacy created bonds lasting lifetimes. PT boat reunions decades after the war felt like family gatherings, because that's what we were: a family forged in combat. Food on PT boats deserves mention, or perhaps complaint. We lived on K rations. Spam appeared at every meal. Powdered eggs tasted like cardboard. Whatever we could trade from larger ships supplemented our diet. Fresh water was precious, rationed for drinking only. We washed in seawater which left salt crystals. They chafed and burned constantly. Coffee black and strong enough to float a wrench was our lifeblood. Some crews became creative, fishing with hand grenades, trading torpedo alcohol to base personnel for real food. Maintenance was constant and absolutely critical. Salt water corroded everything metal. Tropical heat rotted wood and fabric. High-speed operations stressed every component to breaking limits. We spent more time maintaining boats than fighting in them. Every man became mechanic, carpenter, and electrician by necessity. A PT boat with engine failure in enemy waters was a death trap, so we treated maintenance like religion. Weather in the Solomons was our constant enemy. Tropical squalls appeared from nowhere. Calm seas turned into mountains of water instantly. Lightning strikes could fry radios and electrical systems. Heat and humidity were so oppressive men passed out at their posts. But bad weather was also our friend, hiding us from enemy aircraft, making our small boats harder to spot among wind-driven waves. Navigation in those waters required skills never taught at Annapolis. Charts were often wrong, based on surveys from the 1800s. Coral reefs appeared overnight after storms. We learned to read water color and wave patterns, to smell land before seeing it, to navigate by instinct when instruments failed. Every successful patrol added to our mental maps of those deadly waters. Japanese response to PT boats evolved throughout the war. They developed special shallow draft destroyers specifically designed to hunt us. Coordinated search patterns used float planes and destroyers together. They even tried using captured PT boats as decoys. But for every countermeasure they developed, we developed countermeasures. It became a deadly chess game played at 40 knots in complete darkness. One aspect rarely discussed was the psychological toll. Living constantly on edge. Knowing any patrol could be your last. Watching friends die in horrific ways. It marked us all permanently. Some men cracked completely, requesting transfers even though it meant being labeled cowards. Others became addicted to adrenaline, volunteering for increasingly dangerous missions. Most of us just endured, finding ways to cope with fear that never really went away. The humor that developed was dark but necessary. We named boats things like Sudden Death, Hell's Angels, Grim Reaper. We painted cartoon characters on our torpedoes. Donald Duck riding a torpedo was popular. We made up songs about sinking Japanese ships. The more gruesome, the better. It was psychological armor, a way to make the unbearable bearable. PT boat impact extended far beyond the Pacific theater. When Normandy invasion was planned, PT boats were included to protect the fleet from German E-boats. Lessons learned in the Solomons were applied in the Mediterranean, the English Channel, even European rivers. American PT boat doctrine influenced naval thinking worldwide, inspiring similar programs in dozens of navies. Looking back now decades later, I'm amazed we survived. We were mostly kids playing with deadly toys, in a war that killed millions. We made mistakes that should have killed us, took risks that make me shudder in retrospect. But we also accomplished something remarkable. We took an untested concept and turned it into a war-winning weapon. We proved American innovation and courage could overcome any obstacle. PT boat legacy lives on in today's Navy. Every fast attack craft, every special operations boat, every vessel designed to strike quickly and disappear. They carry DNA from those original mosquito boats. Sailors who crew them probably don't know about Nights Off Vela la Vela or the terror we brought to Japanese convoys, but they are spiritual descendants, carrying on traditions of speed, surprise, and audacity. When people ask if I'm proud of my service, I tell them about that night of July 20th, 1943. 3 small wooden boats attacked a major enemy convoy. We sent thousands of Japanese soldiers to the bottom. We emerged from darkness, just as our title suggests. We disappeared before enemies could respond. We were America's secret weapon. We changed the Pacific War's entire course. The Japanese were stunned not just by our boats, but by what they represented. American willingness to innovate, to take risks, to challenge conventional wisdom. They had studied our Navy for decades. They knew our battleships and carriers, our traditions and tactics, but they never imagined we'd send wooden speedboats armed with torpedoes to challenge their steel warships. That failure of imagination cost them dearly. In the end, the PT boat story is uniquely American. We took a British concept, powered it with Packard engines designed for aircraft, armed it with torpedoes originally designed for destroyers, crewed it with civilians who had never seen oceans before Pearl Harbor. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Because we made it work through sheer determination and ingenuity. The last operational PT boat was retired in 1959, replaced by newer, faster, more capable vessels. But for those of us who served on them in World War II, there will always be the boats that won the Pacific War. We proved size doesn't determine victory. Courage matters more than armor. American sailors in wooden boats could defeat anyone, anywhere, anytime. As I finish this account, sitting in my study, surrounded by faded photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings, I can still hear those Packard engines roaring through the night. I can still feel Solomon seawater spray on my face, still smell cordite and diesel fumes. Most of all, I can still feel pride, being part of something revolutionary, something that changed naval warfare forever. We were boys who became men in those wooden boats, fighting a war we didn't start, but determined to finish. We attacked from darkness because that's where we were strongest, where our speed and surprise gave us advantage. The Japanese learned to fear darkness they once owned, learned that American ingenuity could turn any disadvantage into advantage. That's the PT boat legacy. Not just ships we sank or battles we won, but proof that free people fighting for freedom can overcome any tyranny. We were small, fast, and deadly. We were secret weapons that stayed secret just long enough to turn the tide. We were the Mosquito Fleet that brought down an empire one torpedo at a time. The Japanese were stunned by America's secret PT boats because they represented everything the Imperial Navy hadn't expected from Americans. Innovative thinking, aggressive tactics, the willingness to risk everything on an unproven concept. By the time they understood the threat we posed, it was too late. The shadows they had once ruled now belonged to us. From those shadows, we struck without mercy until the rising sun finally set on Japan's Pacific Empire.